Can everyone put that on mute, please? Thank you. Okay, welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. Start off with item. Well, before I start with the podcast, can I also welcome Paula O'Connor, who's the chair of the Council's Governance and Audit Committee, who hasn't come along to check on us, but is actually going to be presenting the report and later on, but also is going to be sitting in on the rest of the meeting. So, as part of the much closer relationship between our committee and her committee. So, welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Peter. I welcome the attendance from the beginning as well. Thank you.
Good. Right. Any apologies for absence? I haven't been notified. Anybody got any apologies? No. Okay. Any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest? No. Okay. Thank you. And prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. So I shall leave you with nobody's going to say anything on that either. So, okay, so move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the 14th of September. So I'm going to go through them on page for accuracy on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Are we happy that those minutes are accurate? Yes, I take your silence as consent. Thank you. In that case, on to public question times. Bridge, I don't think we've had any public questions, have we?
No public questions, Chair.
No, thank you. Okay, in that case, we move on to one of the substantive items, which is the update on Swansea Achieving Better Together, the Recovery and Transformation Plan. Welcome, Councillor Rob Stewart, Leader, and Councillor Andrea Lewis, the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Service Transformation. I understand you're being supported by Adam Hill, the Deputy Chief Executive, and Marlyn Dixon, the Strategic Change Programme Manager. Rob, do you want to say a few words to introduce this item?
Very, very briefly, Chair. I mean, you've already had the report, which lists a number of actions in there that we've taken since we last appeared before the committee. Again, I'd like to put on record my thanks to all of the staff who have continued with their extraordinary efforts, not just to do their day job, but to support people in our communities through the pandemic. The pandemic is not over. Again, we had 50,000 infections across the UK yesterday. We are not out of this pandemic yet, and I think that's one thing to bear in mind for the committee today, is that whilst we set some phases for the recovery plan, that's very much against the backdrop of how the pandemic pans out. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball for that, and we have to continue to respond to the challenges that emerge as we get through the pandemic. We hope that 2022 will see the end of the pandemic, but we are by no means out of that yet. But a lot of good work is still going on, and you'll have seen that in the update that we sent you. Chair, I mean, if there is anything specifically, obviously, I was very grateful for sight of some of the questions that I know the committee are keen to delve into today. So to save time, I probably will keep most of my comments for responses to the questions, because I know they cover large parts of what's in the report.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob. I'm going to start off by asking the questions we agreed before in the pre-meeting. Then if other people want to come in and ask questions, please raise your hand and I'll bring you in once we've exhausted those pre-meeting questions. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is about the refocus phase, which is described in the report as being up to May 2022, which is just over 7 months away. So what are the headlines and tangible achievements from this refocus thus far, and what are the key targets for the next 7 months?
So again, if I just begin, and obviously Adam may wish to come in on some of these, but again, I would hope that the committee would see them not as arbitrary timeframes, because again, we're in a phase which is fluid, but progress on some of the refocus elements have been made, and I'll run through just a few of those at the moment. Obviously, we've got the strategic program manager with us today, and Marlyn was appointed in June 2021. We've had the relaunch of the Leadership Hub and the relaunch of the Ideas Hub, as well as an updated timetable for the MTFP. In terms of some of the policies, we've had a renew agile policy, and you'll know that We've continued to work really successfully in terms of making sure that our staff can continue to support people in our services across the council. I think it's also important to note that our council has not discontinued key services in the way that some other local authorities have had to, and I think that's a testament again to how agile we've been in terms of responding to the challenges that have emerged during the pandemic. Moving to education and learning, there's been some particularly good work there. Obviously, we've had blended learning for a large part of the period of the last 12 months, but now schools are back fully into classroom learning. But to assist with people, a further 4,000 devices have been delivered to schools since the 12th of April this year. The professional learning programme is in place for practitioners in schools. Prices of paid school meals, as you know, were frozen as part of the budget to assist parents who may have been struggling to meet the cost of school meals. And in terms of safeguarding and well-being, monitoring of vulnerable children has continued with shared criteria across both education and child and family services to make sure that there's a single point of contact in relation to children accessing service and on-site provision. And again, that's been really critical to make sure we don't just focus on those children who are, if you like, in the most critical situations, but those just approaching that. So it's to make sure that there is that cross service focus. In terms of care services, work has obviously continued to maintain focus on ensuring critical health and social care services remain resilient during this time. The committee will be aware of extreme pressures in terms of social care and health services across Wales and the UK. The Health Board were reporting wait times in A&E of up to 11 hours in recent weeks, and that is at a time when we wouldn't expect long waits like that in our health service. And of course, as we get towards the really difficult period that we're expecting during the winter period, which we see where winter pressures approach every year. This year, we're expecting a resurgence of the flu virus because, of course, with the lockdowns in previous years, people have essentially been protected from the flu virus. We didn't see hardly any flu at all last year. And we're expecting to see a significant resurgence of flu, which is why it's important that people do go and get their flu jabs at the present time. There are walk-in sessions being offered to people across Swansea at the present time to get flu jabs. And of course, when they're asked to do so, the people who are in the vulnerable groups get their booster jab as well for the COVID vaccines, because again, one of the worries is how flu and COVID will play together during the winter months. But again, I would place on record the absolutely amazing efforts that our social care and health workers are continuing to provide to keep people safe in our communities. But we are under incredibly difficult pressures at the moment, compounded, I have to say, by the arrangements around Brexit and the new arrangements for labour movements. We are unable to rely on European labour in the way that we would previously have done so. And that is a direct consequence of the post-Brexit arrangements that are in place in the UK. And they are not just impacting, of course, social care. Social care is indirectly impacted as well because of the pressures in other sectors like retail and logistics, where retailers like Amazon, Tesco's and others are offering bonuses and incentive payments to tempt people out of the social care sector and into the retail sector. So there are some real challenges there. In terms of community response, you'll know that we already had a really significant local area coordination network when the pandemic hit. And I'm pleased to say that has continued to expand and now covers the whole of Swansea. So that's really important. And again, our LACs are doing wonderful work in terms of that early intervention, prevention, spotting of issues and supporting people to stay out of residential care across our communities. We've got volunteering toolkits and a training programme that has been launched to support that. The partnership approach to community calling project, which provides free refurbished smartphones and free credit via partner organisations to residents, is live, and over 162 phones have been distributed so far this year, and more partners engaged to donate mobiles. I have to say as well, announcements are due shortly on an arrangement that we have been able to put in place with some fantastic work being done by Mark Jones at DVLA, where also we'll be able to acquire and distribute X devices which have been used in the civil service for use in our schools across Swansea. And again, we're expecting hundreds of devices to be made available shortly for distribution to our schools across Swansea. And that's largely due to the efforts that have been made by Mark Jones in DVLA, who's been outstanding in terms of the work that he's done to try and not only help in terms of avoid the decommissioning of devices and the environmental impacts that brings, but also put together a program that brings them back into use and that they can be then redirected to schools and to pupils who need them. In terms of economy and environment, obviously transport links and local transport fund bids have been submitted. About just over 3.3 million have gone in to date. In terms of the city centre, the CCTV camera upgrade is progressing and is now in the design phase. So again, you'll know that our ambition is to bring the latest version of CCTV coupled with the best Wi-Fi and best connectivity that we can for the city centre areas, and that will help obviously in terms of the detection and detection and also the prevention of crime. In terms of the COVID economic recovery plan, local businesses have been supported. Safeguarding jobs, I think I reported at council we've had some 500 bids in towards the grants from the local recovery fund. That if every business was successful in acquiring the £10,000 grant, that would be some £5 million. So again, it's a significant investment from us as a local recovery fund. We've obviously been supporting local members in terms of what they wish to do for the priorities in their wards as well, and those are making their way through the recovery fund approvals process. So thanks to the members who've identified local priorities, and again, we'll be continuing a rolling programme of approvals there. In terms of our homeless strategy, I'm sure Councillor Andrea Lewis will say a bit more on that. So perhaps if I dip over that one, and I'll allow Andrea to come in on that one, because I'm sure she'll want to say something. And then perhaps if I pause there, and perhaps if Adam wants to come in terms of some of our key targets, in terms of where we are against that, and no doubt I'm more than happy, Chair, to come back on some of the stuff around the city centre regeneration, some of the bigger projects, which I know the members want to ask specific questions on.
Okay, we have got a lot of other questions, so Adam, if you want to be very brief, we'd be very grateful.
Obviously, the term that it's known by is achieving better together, and I think what Rob's demonstrated there is just what the partnership is that this has done. What one of the questions is the achievements and tangible outcomes. You've heard education, child and family, safeguarding, working with health, police, and so on, local area coordinator network and how they're supporting communities and third sector involvement, community calling project, DVLA, device and education. So just shows that actually achieving better together is what the council is about, that leadership role of supporting, engaging and bringing communities together to help themselves and also be able to help others. Just in terms of key targets then over the next sort of 7 months plus, we have a number of strategies that are currently in train. So co-production strategy, workforce strategy and engagement and consultation strategy, volunteering strategy, and a review and update of the corporate plan. We've also got things like the Regional Economic Development Delivery Plan, looking at the CJCs early in 2022, looking for regional sign-off. We're also looking at shaping the Swansea procurement exercises, new longer-term partners secured for delivery of next phases of regeneration, and I'm sure we'll talk more about regeneration later. And that first 3 sites, we'll bring a further report on that, but just showing that continuation of regeneration, working in partnership, working with others to regenerate and reinfuse Swansea and be that leader for inward investment as well as our own investment. We need to continue and expand on public communications. We did a lot during COVID in terms of how we communicate with all our residents, businesses and visitors to the area. And again, we want to build on that further to make sure that all the messages are getting through and we capitalise on that inward influx of people, certainly through the destination management processes that we have, but also capitalising on the new investments that are in place, and obviously the opening of the new arena in 2022. We need to look at the financial impact of COVID, and we'll continue to respond to the COVID emergency and pandemic, and look at that financial impact and shape our medium-term financial plan, which will be key to looking at the next 3 to 4 years of how we can shape the council and make sure we can continue to respond and be sustainable for the future. So there's sort of the big key steps over the next sort of 7 months.
Thank you for that, Adam. But I'm going to move on to Mike Weiss, who's got a question about what we're learning from other councils. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If the leader can perhaps, in regards to comparisons, really, is the council's work on recovery and transformation similar to what is going on in other councils? And what, if anything, has this council learned from others, whether about processes or solutions?
Rob?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor White. Yeah, obviously, a couple of the things for us were that obviously, as I said in my initial answer, we didn't have to reduce key services at the time of the pandemic in the way that perhaps other councils have had to do so, which is great. But that doesn't mean that obviously we work in a bubble and we don't try and learn from other councils who are doing good things. And a couple of the things that we have done, Councillor White, is we've obviously looked at some of the good work going on, and I'll give you a couple. So specifically, we've looked across the border into MPT, at the Vale of Glamorgan and at Cardiff Council, looking at what they're doing in specific areas where we feel that we could perhaps take some of their ideas and implement them here. So in terms of Vale of Glamorgan, we had a look at their transformation programme, and like Swansea, they've identified that the pandemic has provided an opportunity to transform at pace and at scale. Their renewal and reshaping programme has a very similar focus to ours here in Swansea, and a desire to make greater links across the community with partners. So again, very much aligned to the Vale in terms of the strategy. And I think, it's not just local government that's looking at that, it's national governments as well, and both public and private sector organisations. I think, the way in which we work has changed forever, and I'm sure it'll settle down again into a new rhythm and a new pattern. But certainly it'll be different from what happened prior to the pandemic. So again, looking at how we deliver services in that respect, then all obviously will evolve and will continue to change. We've also been supporting Caerphilly with their governance and assurance programme, following a recommendation from the Wales Audit Office, or Welsh Audit, in that they held us up as a really good example of the processes we had in place for those services. And obviously, we liaised through the WLGA. We talked to other councils in terms of service transformation. But, it's not something that's wholly just pinned to the pandemic, and it's wholly pinned to recovery. We were a transforming council prior to the pandemic. We had an ambitious programme to change and update the way in which and modernise the way in which we delivered services. So, I think the pandemic may have accelerated some of that in certain areas, and certainly changed how we do business, as we're doing today on a virtual call, which would probably, if we'd have suggested this as the normal way of working for councillors prior to March 2019, there have probably been years of debate about it. So, but we've all moved to that way of working. So I think, there are lots that we can point to that not only people are learning from us, and I do think we set a very, very good example here of how change can be managed effectively. And, I'm grateful to the way in which the unions have engaged with us and supported those changes, because it is important that the change is a collaborative process and one that takes staff with us, because the staff, as I said at the beginning of this, have been outstanding. And, we continue to look at how we can recognise and reward the staff. And that is something we plan to bring forward some ideas on shortly, because, again, whilst we're very grateful to the Welsh Government for the recognition that they've given to those working in the social care sector, we are fully aware that the efforts are cross-council, and we want to bring forward a recognition and reward programme that looks at how we can reward all staff.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, Mike? Yeah. Okay, right. Moving on
Yes,
to
thank you.
Chris Holly, governance. Christopher?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you, Leader. I would like to ask a couple of questions about governance of the Recovery Fund, and it seems to be very much orientated to a bureaucracy-based system. You know, we've been told that we've got to meet with the cabinet members to get approval, and then we've got to get some costings. Then on top of all that, there's forms to be filled in by various people, and then in some cases, we've got some of the businesses have got to produce some paperwork as well. What I was wondering was, is there any way we can look at streamlining this system to be able to get more done in this relatively short time? Thank you.
Well, I'll hand over to Adam in a second, but I'm sure if Ben Smith is on the call, you know, he would no doubt say the same as I'm going to say, that you know, whilst we will try and get as much money out the door and as many requests approved as possible, they do have to go through the audit process to ensure that money that is spent, that's taxpayers' money, is spent effectively and appropriately. And you know, that does require an approval process. We've tried to make it as light touch as possible. The forms that councillors have to fill out are pretty straightforward. You know, they're very light touch. They only ask for the minimum, and then of course, you know, hopefully the requests that come in go direct to the cabinet members. They hopefully give an endorsement. They then go to the relevant director, and they're forwarded then on to the board for approval, and hopefully the money is released shortly after that, so that the programme can then deliver it. And you know, if it's additional play equipment, we've got Christy Tillman doing a great job there, helping to deliver over 30 play upgrades. If it's community enhancements or well-being, then again it could be Martin Dixon who is obviously leading on that element. So we've got the programme managers in place to, once the approvals are in place, to make sure that the money and the schemes are delivered as quickly as possible. Obviously, Councillor Holly, I wish we could do more quickly, but again, we've got to recognise as well that we're adding all of this extra spend, which, you know, no council in Wales is delivering at the same scale as we're delivering. There is nobody that has a £20 million recovery fund, and that is coming on top of the extra £1 million for capital works last year, and the extra £2 million for play fund, and the biggest ever capital scheme. I mean, you know, we do have a hugely ambitious programme of spend at the present time, and you know, I do commend the officers and the cabinet members for getting through those requests as quickly as possible. We all want to see the money out the door and the schemes delivered in the communities as quickly as possible. But again, if there are any ways that we can again improve that process and shorten it, but keep the robust audit challenge in there, then that is something we're keen to do.
Okay, Chris. All right. Adam hasn't indicated, so I'm going to move on to Peter Jones about reporting mechanisms.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think when I read the report, my immediate reaction was bewilderment. Essentially, the rather reflecting the concerns I think that Councillor Holly expressed a moment ago, and the word bureaucratic again crossed my mind. I appreciate that there's much to be done, and there are many people involved and many sections of the council sharing an overall responsibility. But what struck me was all this has been going on, and I've not been aware of it. And therefore, my concern was following on from Councillor Holly's concern is, what sort of reporting processes exist to ensure that councillors like me actually know what's going on and have an opportunity, if appropriate, to contribute? Thank you, Chair.
Rob?
Yeah, thanks. I'll pick that up. I mean, I'm a little surprised that Councillor Jones says he was unaware of it. It may be that he was referring to the governance model rather than the opportunities. But if I try and cover both, and I'll call Adam Hill in just to talk about the structures that sit behind this. But I know all councillors received emails from both on both the economic recovery fund, where application forms are provided there, allowing councillors to approach businesses in their locality to assist them in obtaining access to the £10,000 grant. They were also sent application forms to put forward proposals for the capital schemes and for the play fund schemes. And as I said, I think we've got over 30 live play schemes at the moment in delivery. And then on top of that, I know that application forms were issued out to each councillor for general access to the recovery fund for community priorities in their area that they may wish to ask for approvals of. And again, those are being followed up with training sessions provided by the programme managers and the officers dealing with the process. And obviously there's been political announcements, both at budget and subsequently in many meetings, about the opportunities. So, I mean, I would hope all councillors knew that the funds were available and that they could access them and what they could spend them on, and the sorts of priorities that their wards could benefit from. In terms of the process of what happens when you submit something, I'm sure Adam can run you through that again. So Adam, if I perhaps over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Just say, you know, it's been covered far and wide in terms of certainly the recovery fund, and if it's more wider to the Achieving Better Together whole scheme, that's been through all PDCs, all work streams get picked up at the PDCs, that gets picked up at the audit committee in terms of an update, gets picked up here in terms of updates, as well as generally across all the comms in the Chief Exec's blog and on the newsletter. So certainly plenty of opportunities. What would happen when it comes in? Certainly in terms of the recovery fund, if that was to come through, once the forms are completed and sent through, and it is important we have that governance to make sure, one, we're not spending money more than once, and that we're not dipping into lots of different funds. So we need to make sure that that's all benefit, and also to make sure it's a spend that is appropriate and isn't breaking any regulations or laws in terms of the spend and where or why it is being spent. So when that comes through, it's signed off as already identified by the cabinet member and the director. That comes through to a panel. The panel will look at it offline to make sure it can be speeded through as fast as possible. And if it meets all the criteria, it would be committed immediately. If there is any challenge, it would go through to the Recovery, Reshaping and Budget Strategy Board for authorisation. That meets every month, so whenever that came in, it would only be a matter of a number of 1, 2 or maybe 3 weeks maximum before it would be heard, and then immediately it goes back to be either endorsed or corrective measures put in place in order for that to come through. So it is far and wide. In terms of, I didn't know if you wanted me to cover the governance structure for the actual for the Achieving Better Together in its entirety. That's definitely not bureaucratic. We've kept it simple into 3 phases. One is the delivery and operational, which is where the workstream leads are across the care service, education, learning, environment, and so on. That then reports into organisational cross-cutting to make sure there's synergies across all those work streams and to identify where there's any duplication or whether there's areas we could work together on. And then that's overseen on a strategic level by the Recovery, Shaping and Budget Strategy Board. And that's as bureaucratic yet. So each area has its clear either operational, programme or strategic view. I hope that helps clarify.
Peter?
Yes, so very quickly, Chair. Yes, obviously, Chair, I'm fully aware of the various processes to which the leader and Adam have referred that have involved councillors. I think it's not a concern. I use the word bewilderment somewhat advisedly, and I use the word bureaucratic somewhat advisedly, because, of course, bureaucratic can be pejorative, or it can just be a description of a complex structure. And it clearly is a complex structure, and I trust that it delivers for what we would expect from it. Maybe just reading the report, as I did, as I'm sure others have done several times, it just simply struck me just how complex the whole thing is. And it's on one level, what I say here, and it just assumes the tasks that the council has to face. But also, I just felt that as a sort of backbench councillor, if you like, All of this is going on, and whilst obviously we do get involved in terms of the recovery fund and so on, a great deal. Perhaps it's my own fault that I wasn't aware of, and I'm very impressed that it's going on, and I'm sure it matters and it will work. But it was that kind of idea that I was trying to express, perhaps not very well. That it looks bureaucratic, but it's probably necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think just following on from what Peter was saying, at the last time we looked at this, we were told that each work stream and individual projects, as work progresses, would include the involvement of councillors through policy development committees and workshops for wider awareness and engagement. I'm not aware of any workshops having gone on. Is that actually happening, or is that still to come? Rob,
if I can, yeah, just pick that one up. Yeah, so there are a number of work streams that have come through. So members may be aware of the Swansea-based City Deals Skills and Talent business case that's gone forward. That went to the PDC on the 16th of September. The Education and Learning work stream, for example, has gone through there also, looking at economic and environmental work. Tackling poverty strategy was gone to the Poverty Reduction Policy Development Committee on the 26th of July. Promoting affordable credit draft policy, that came to the Poverty Reduction Policy Development Committee on the 28th of June. The recovery plan and update has been to the Recovery and Future Generations Board. The Economy and Environment and Infrastructure PDC has talked about and been involved in and will come again on the 21st of October. The Economic Recovery Plan, High Street Regeneration, Green Fleet Policy are just some of the examples. Talking about workshops, then the I think there is a workshop coming very soon on the future workforce and how that's going to be developed. We needed to get to a discussion document first in terms of a workforce plan. That will be coming in the fullness of time to those groups. And so it has been to many different PDCs. It's not always badged as Achieving Better Together, although it's usually within the document, because of course what we're doing is pulling in all council services about transforming what we already do. So it's under the banner of Achieving Better Together, but is simplified through actually it's what each service is delivering. The Achieving Better Together banner just makes sure that we do it as effectively and efficiently as we can, thinking about other work streams like workforce or so on, and making sure it's all joined up. So that's the benefit of the programme.
Okay, and in the report which you've submitted to the committee, there's in the appendix you've got the various work streams listed there as individual work streams. Are there any linkages? I mean, have we got an overriding view of that coordination and where necessary pulling those together? Is that what the new appointment is about?
Yeah, so two levels on that. One of which is the organisational cross-cutting and transformation of the steering group. That's that role there. So everything feeds into the steering group, and that's where we have the overview. And then that's where the synergies come together. So we would identify if there was something that two areas needed to work on, and they would then, through that group, be able to deliver that programme together. And so if you look on the detail below that, it sort of does explain where different groups are working together within the programme.
Okay, thank you. Right, Peter, do you want to talk about the environment? I know you've got some connection problems. Maybe we can work through them. Are you there? I think we've lost Peter Jones for the time being. Hopefully he'll be able to come back in. Okay, so we'll move on to Mike White then. On the environment, economy and environment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks again for letting me ask the second question. Can I ask to what extent has planned development and regeneration activity and its contribution to recovery and transformation been affected by the pandemic, and what work, and if any work, has been delayed?
Okay, who's going to come in that?
Chair, if I should pick up that one. Well, obviously, as we thank you, Councillor White. As we reported early days, I mean, in the original lockdown, we lost a few weeks with the arena there, and we remained a few weeks behind then throughout the pandemic, but only a few weeks. And I think we're on for practical completion in the latter part of November, early part of December, I believe, at the present time. That is when practical completion can take place. However, we've had discussions with ATG about how they can overlap some of their activities in the arena, because obviously once practical completion takes place, they will then move in to kit out the arena with their specific requirements in terms of kit and facilities, etc. But overall, Councillor White, I mean, given that we're on a hugely ambitious timescale, we've kept largely to that. As I said, we're a few weeks behind, and as you'll have noted, no doubt, a number of shows have already now gone on sale for the commencement of shows at the arena early in the new year. So that's all on track. Obviously, in the latter few weeks, like everywhere else in the UK, we are really starting to feel the impacts of both pandemic, but also the post-Brexit arrangements, where the costs of labour, the costs of materials, the availability of labour and materials has been an issue. That has obviously affected the internal works a little bit, but again, really grateful to Rivington for how they've managed to reorganise some of the supply chains and some of the labour there to ensure that we stayed largely on track and overcame the issues that the post-Brexit arrangements are causing for everyone. Outside of that, again, if you'll have taken a trip through the city centre recently, it's not just Copper Bay that has made progress. Obviously, the Kingsway is now complete. The other private schemes have continued during the pandemic, and Mariner Street are now virtually complete. We've appointed the contractors for the Palace Theatre, and again, work will begin on that to bring it back into use. We're a few weeks away from Bouygues starting on the Oceana site build, the new innovation hub on the Kingsway, so that will begin very shortly. Obviously, Cabinet have seen an initial report on the new local services hub, which will hopefully house the new library and archives, and works will begin on that in the coming days. Preparatory works there, clearing out some of the old internals from the building, preparing it for full refurbishment. Wine Street, of course, is on track for completion in a few weeks' time, and again, that will help boost the nighttime economy. We're shortly due to bring the final design works for Castle Square Gardens into the public domain and to Cabinet for approval. And of course, work is underway. Pardon me, on the Penderyn Whiskey Distillery at where weavers are on site up at the Copperopolis site. So works continue all around. We've also in the background made really good progress with Skyline in terms of their board, and they have made a number of approvals recently. And again, we're in the final leg, hopefully, of getting that scheme into delivery, and I expect further announcements on that in due course. And people should also prepare, which I can't say too much about at this point in time, but people should also prepare for an announcement around a future proposal for Tidal Lagoon in Swansea, which is due to come around COP26. So again, I'm restricted, unfortunately, today on what I can say on that one. But just to say, Councillor White, I think, given all the headwinds of Brexit and COVID, we've made remarkable progress in the city centre. There will be lots more to come. Now we've appointed Urban Splash, and again, their three priority sites are likely to be the Civic Centre, the St Thomas Station site, and Phase 2 of Copper Bay, where we will hopefully see the commencement of the build on the public sector hub, which will obviously secure and attract thousands of jobs into the city centre, supporting businesses, retail, leisure, etc. So momentum not just continues but picks up. So yes, I think I think certainly I think members will see that Swansea's being looked at the moment as a blueprint for how you maintain your delivery and recover post-COVID.
Thank you, Leader. I say, I know, obviously, I understand the issues that were with the pandemic and issues around the materials is obviously a national problem, but it sounds very encouraging and very positive for Swansea. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've got Peter Jones back now. Peter, are you able to talk to us about the environment?
Yes, apologies to everyone. I lost contact and had to bow out and rejoin, but hopefully you can all hear me and maybe even see me now. Yes, the environment, if I may. We're all aware of climate management and whether anything sensible is going to happen in relation to that. And we've just completed the week of COP15 in China, which of course was looking at the United Nations Development Goals, particularly for biodiversity, habitats and the natural environment. And in that context, therefore, my issue is with the future of the environment. And in particular, how well does this plan reflect council priorities concerning the natural environment, not just climate change, of course, but the natural environment decade. And therefore, I was a bit surprised to see how little there was in the document in relation to it. So I just welcome a response, please, on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got Andrea Lewis wants to come in. I think we got the gist despite the technical problems. Andrea.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Black. I think the weather's not helping today with connectivity for sure. But just to give a bit of reassurance really to Councillor Jones in terms of the plan, it does actually refer to climate emergency under the modern council strand. And governance has been in place since 2019 on this matter and has included biodiversity, green infrastructure and local development plans from the outset. I think we should also note of importance that the climate emergency and tackling climate change has been aligned in terms of activity with our corporate plan objectives. For example, maintaining and enhancing Swansea's natural resources and biodiversity. And of course, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is interwoven into every policy decision and every strategy that we formulate, striving for a greener, healthier Wales. As Councillor Jones knows, and I won't repeat myself too much because in a previous scrutiny meeting, I have given an outline of the climate emergency steering group that we have. But I think it's fair to say that following the recent nature emergency declaration by Welsh Government, that the steering group has reflected on this. And we will be considering adding nature as part of the focus of that group as well. But that there will be more to follow on that in a future cabinet report. And so just to give assurance to Councillor Jones, it may not be heavily referenced, but that does not mean that it's not referred to and considered in every decision that we take as a local authority. I'm not sure if Adam wants to add to that response, Chair.
Adam, do you want to add anything briefly?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I think Andrea answered it really well in terms of that sort of cover. It's just the final bit that Andrea said in terms of decision making, but also in consideration, thinking about whatever we're planning, whatever work stream it's in, whether it's biodiversity, climate emergency, nature, that is all considered. It's as important to us as it is on health and safety or impact assessment. It's that wide context, so it is covered right the way through. We don't signpost every strategy within here or every requirement. It's as a red, and I think when this is refreshed, probably coming into the new administration, we will see that probably needs to be a little more explicit in the actual updated report to reference more on that greener nature and climate emergency agendas.
Okay, Peter, are you okay with that, or?
Yes, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Andrea. I just wanted reassurance in relation to these issues, and I know these good things are going on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Jeff Jones. Are you there, Jeff?
Yes, I am, Peter. Yeah, very interesting questions. Yeah, I know Rob, you actually said at the start that the time frames are not arbitrary, you know, for the Achieving Better Together programme. But in the programme, phase 2, the Refocus Phase, which is due to be completed by May 2022, does this mean that the future workforce numbers and structures will be in place by then? Or if not, when are they actually going to be in place?
So I know Adam will no doubt come in on that. I think just to clarify that point, Councillor Jones, if and I don't believe this was a scenario that'll come to pass, but you know, if we got to a position where a new variant emerged and we were then unfortunately the vaccines were rendered ineffective, then of course we would potentially be looking at a new lockdown. So in that respect, whilst we have a plan here, it is subject to what happens in the phases of the pandemic that emerges over the winter period, and nobody has a crystal ball that says that is absolutely the case. The reason for the sort of break at May 2022 between the phases is primarily due to the fact that we acknowledge there's an election then, and a new administration will come into being at that point. We also know that there will be the appointment of a new chief executive as well as a new administration. So it's only right that that new administration then puts its stamp on what the next phase looks like. And as Adam has already said, that will include updating some of the things that we're already doing, no doubt. So yes, there is work going on at the moment in terms of the staffing numbers, etc. And I'm sure Adam will say a little bit about that. But just in terms of the phasing, I think the only really hard date in there that we can all be sure of is that there will be an election next May, and at that point, the next administration will be formed, depending on what the voters say in Swansea.
Okay, are you okay with that, Jeff? Do you want to ask your other question on the economy and the environment, or about phase 2 of the city deal?
Yes, thanks for that. Yeah, you know, phase 1 of the city deal was funded by the local authority. I know there's a contribution from Welsh and national government, but if phase 2 of the city deal actually fails to be achieved or partly achieved, what effect will this have on the Together programme, and what alternatives do we have in place, or do we have alternatives in place?
Well, I'll give you my response, and I'll invite Adam in to comment afterwards. But look, I don't start from the position, Councillor Jones, as you would expect me to, of expecting phase 2 to fail and not meet its ambitions. I mean, you know, I am encouraged by the fact that we've appointed Urban Splash, and again, the appointment of Urban Splash allows us actually to do things slightly differently in phase 2 from phase 1, because as you've rightly pointed out, phase 1 was very much a council-led development where we've had to do the heavy lifting in partnership with Welsh and UK governments, and that's because you know, city deals are there to deal with market failure, and that means the public sector stepping in where the private sector weren't able to or weren't willing to. Now we have built a significant momentum within the city where we're seeing actually private investment coming in and developers taking on sites and redeveloping themselves. There's an opportunity to deliver phase 2 in a slightly different way, still with council intervention and still with council involvement, but there is much more flexibility for us in phase 2, much more opportunity for us to do things differently. And again, you know, what we will do as we approach the detail of those schemes is look at the best funding model for us, the best capital model. There are ones which will range from the private sector potentially building some of this for us and then potentially us renting space back. That is one perfectly legitimate model, or us building it ourselves and becoming the tenant ourselves. So, you know, our own tenant in our own building. All of those options are there for us. And again, we look at what is best for the taxpayer, you know, assuming that it is our decision at the time. So, but I start from the fact that we've built a real head of steam here. We've got a very, very strong story of successful delivery now in Swansea, and I see no reason why phase 2 will not be successful.
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting.
Okay, Adam, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you. Just 2 points. One on the last bit, and it's just a bit of around terminology. The question seemed to focus around the city deal phase 2. Well, of course, actually, it's the city centre phase 2. It isn't dependent on the city deal, the second part. So it's only that the city deal is all going well. You know, the arena, Kingsway, digital district, and so on is all really successful and all on target. The phase 2 is just around that city centre, and you know, as Rob's already said, you know, we're looking for funding from elsewhere, but isn't specifically around city deal. So that's the first thing. And just on that previous question with regard to workforce, I think it's you know, the workforce numbers and structure isn't dependent on the next 7 months. It's dependent on what happens in and around us. You know, spending assessment, spending review that'll be coming in, where it goes in terms of COVID. New corporate plan, new administration. So all that will help shape, and there's lots of change to happen. So we will be embedding a workforce strategy, which means that we can be fleet of foot, agile and responsive to wherever and however the authority needs to move to put us in the strongest position. As we have been doing all through the pandemic, we will continue to do that moving forward.
Okay, right, Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is very brief. Thank you for all the very positive information that has been forthcoming. It should all portend well for the future if everything goes as it seems. Can I just flag up something very minor in terms of all the grand policies we've been listening to? But over the last few days, I've had calls from residents saying that they are struggling to get through to the council. So this is coming back to basics. They can't get a human. Then they can't get, if they leave messages, they can't get replies. If they send emails, they don't get replies. So I just wondered if, you know, in amongst all of what we've heard, that perhaps there can be a look at the way that people are struggling, it would appear, to get through to the switchboard. One of the situations was through to environment. You know, let's not forget the nitty-gritty, because it is very important that people who need to speak to someone can eventually get through to someone. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to pick that one up. I mean, I fully agree with Councillor Fitzgerald. If people are trying to contact us, there should be a number of ways in which they can do that successfully, including via the contact centre, via email, or via dedicated lines. I'd welcome Councillor Fitzgerald sending me on the details of the individual concerns that's been raised with her, so I can check whether somebody's rung an individual number or a dedicated number, perhaps that isn't active at the time, or whether they've gone through the advised numbers to our contact centre. Obviously, Councillor Fitzgerald will be aware that we have a contact centre which is working largely remotely with staff operating from home and other locations, but they are dealing with inquiries on a regular basis. I know officers are continuing to respond to emails that are forwarded through, but if there are isolated pockets where that hasn't happened, then by all means send that through, and certainly myself and Adam will look at any issues and try and find out if there's an issue that exists there that we weren't aware of.
If I can add before Adam comes back in, I've had similar complaints as well. In terms of the computerized phone system we've got up and running with the remote contact centre, I'm assuming that if someone is working from home, that you're able to connect them remotely using that system. That's my understanding, because that seems to be a problem which people have highlighted to me as well. So maybe Adam could respond on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Just because people are working from home doesn't make any difference to the system whatsoever. The system is the system. If they were working at, it's a digital system. So our existing system is the same. It doesn't matter where anybody is, it still goes through the digital technology, so it just routes it to them. So it wouldn't make any difference. The fact that we're working from home is exactly the same. If Wendy wants to copy me into anything that she sends to Rob, we'll make sure we follow that up. If there is a system that we're not aware of, that something's failing somewhere, it might just be one or two departments, or as Rob says, one or two numbers that perhaps are no longer live. Don't know, but happily to chase that through. We want to make sure that every call does count and we want to pick it up. So please forward through whatever information you've got, and we'll follow it up.
Okay, Wendy, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine. In fact, I've dealt with it all now. It has been sorted, and I've arranged for a visit from Refuse to this one particular problem, and I'm dealing with some others as well. But thank you. If I need to, I will come to you.
Yeah, similar with mine. I gave an email address to them so they could deal with it that way. So, okay, thank you for that. Anybody got any other questions at all on this report? I'm seeing no more hands, so can I thank you, Rob, Adam, for coming along and answering the questions. It's been very useful, and no doubt we'll write to you in due course as not per normal in terms of the lessons and what we've learned from this particular contribution. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Right, the next item 7 is the annual report on corporate safeguarding. We have Councillor Mark Child, the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Community Health Services, with us. I understand he's supported by Dave Howes, the Director of Social Services, and Simon Jones, the Social Services Strategy and Performance Improvement Officer. Mark, we've got the reports, we've read it. Would you like to do a brief introduction to it?
Yes. Forgive me. I've not long come back from the dentist, so I'm not sure if my mouth is working properly. But
my commiserations.
At least I got there. I'm happy to say a few words to introduce the report. I'm glad you've all read it. I mean, clearly safeguarding is a #1 priority of the council and has remained so throughout the year we're referring to, 2021. In fact, it has become even more important because of the circumstances of COVID and the council's response and to it. I think we took a lead in Swansea and making it a corporate responsibility, and not just a corporate responsibility that was there in writing and as a goal, as something that was actively pursued and embedded in all the different elements of the council, not just resting on the shoulders of social services and perhaps a bit of education as well. So we want everybody from, and you'll see the membership is one of the appendices of who's involved. And they're all involved in sort of multifaceted approaches to safeguarding different work streams across the council as well, which are detailed in the report. And I'm particularly proud of the way that the council has responded to safeguarding over the last through the pandemic. It's been a difficult time, but we've managed to continue with it as a priority and as something at the forefront of our minds in all the services that we've delivered, and making sure that people weren't slipping through the net, or doing everything possible to prevent people slipping through the net during the pandemic. We do anticipate that there will be cases which will come to light because that came to light after lockdown, but it hasn't manifested itself in the wave that we thought we might experience that had been hidden. So, and that's a lot to do with the way the community has reacted and highlighted cases of concern to us, because we haven't been able to be out there as regularly as we would have normally. So I think the people of Swansea deserve praise as well for the level of safeguarding that has been undertaken during the last year. But I and the officers, I'm sure, are happy to answer any questions and any details.
Thank you, Mark. Sue Jones, you've got a first question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Mark. Under the current pressures that we know social services are under, what impact on adult services has this had, the current situation?
Dave House.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the introduction, Mark. Can I kick off by thanking Simon for putting together the report for both for the Corporate Safeguarding Board and then for us to, have something that we could share with Scrutiny. I just want to acknowledge, in busy times, pulling together all of that information from all the various activities that Councillor Charles referred to, is a feat in and of itself. So hopefully the committee, join me in thanking Simon for his work on that. In terms of the impact, so we've obviously had discussions, during the past 18 months via the adult services performance scrutiny session at various times, and you and other members are aware, it's been the most extraordinarily difficult time for our population, for our workforce, for our partners. For the communities of Swansea, frankly, what's been really pleasing, and again, Councillor Charles already referred to that. At any stage during this period, our workforce, and that's a workforce within adult services, but including partners, including across the council, have always come up with solutions to be able to concentrate on what matters at any given time. And top of that list is making sure that we are always able to respond to the most urgent circumstances. And top of the list of the most urgent circumstances are anyone that might be in unsafe circumstances because the usual arrangements that they're relying on aren't in place in the way that we would usually be able to provide, etc., or because the typical trials and tribulations that potentially vulnerable individuals experience, manifested themselves during this period as well. I think particularly important in that, and I was really pleased that we were, on top of everything else, able to implement our priority about creating a dedicated safeguarding team within adult services. We managed to implement that even during this really difficult period, and their work has been outstanding. The feedback that I've had from various sources, individuals, partners, other staff, etc., about the approach that team have been able to take, it's astonishingly, really. We appear to have been able to up our game during a period where we would have thought, things are, may well take a step backwards just because we were potentially overwhelmed with all of our busyness. Again, what's particularly pleasing is that the team have even been able to take more of a preventative approach, so heading off situations rather than waiting until something gets so dire that we're then acting reactively. I suppose our very basic offer is to be able to, I don't know whether you can still hear me because I'm getting a message saying bad network quality. Hopefully you can hear me. Our very basic offer is to make sure that we always have a reactive response where we're operating in the way that we would like to be able to operate. We are able to take that more proactive preventative response as well. During periods of the pandemic, we've had to revert to it's just the reactive response that we can manage, but that's good enough. That meets our fundamental responsibility as a council, and that does make sure that those individuals in most urgent circumstances do get an immediate response when things are potentially or have become unsafe for them. And at the moment, given that we are in a third wave, and that is very much impacting on health and social care services, and it's very much impacting on our population, at the moment we're having to prioritise more of that reactive response. But as soon as we're able to, we will revert to more of a proactive preventative response as well. But at the moment, honest truth is it's a bit more reactive. But I don't want that to give the wrong impression. That absolutely still means that the council are meeting their statutory responsibilities around safeguarding.
Yeah, a third wave with the highest death rate since March, I understand as well. So it's still out there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that okay, Sue?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Can you pass on our support for the staff?
Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Absolutely, yes. We very much appreciate the work all the staff are doing at this difficult time. I think the rest of the questions are down to me, unless other people want to indicate. I think we note in the report there's an expectation that all contractors, companies and individuals carrying out work on behalf of the council have to confirm that they comply with the council's safeguarding process, and this also applies to their staff or their subcontractors. Can you clarify whether training is provided by the council, or if not, how awareness and compliance is demonstrated to the council?
Yeah, so it's probably, fair to say, probably still a work in progress, Chair. However, there are a number of things. So some of the guidance documents that have been developed as part of making these contractual expectations clearer are spelling out some of the things that contractors need to be doing in order to demonstrate compliance, etc. But that's the beginning of the work. I suppose it's again another example, though, of it, we had this expectation that this would be on our work program, this taking forward the work with contractors. We hadn't actually started that work prior to pandemic hitting. Could well have been the case that we, may have, had to say, in pragmatic terms, we'll have to park that work because we're too busy doing other stuff. So again, a huge appreciation to colleagues across. In this particular case, it's particularly Lee Morgan in contracting and procurement, part of commercial services, who's continued to be able to drive forward that work, working with commissioning teams across the council. So hugely impressive as far as I'm concerned that we've made such a significant start, but further work to do. So it remains on our work programme going forward, Councillor Back. In terms of the monitoring of compliance of that, again, it's a bit of a work in progress, and there's different levels of monitoring depending on the nature of the contracted service that we're talking about. So if it was contracted services from a regulated, care provider, clearly there'd be a very high level of monitoring around compliance, not just from us, but from external regulators as well. As you go down the continuum, there would be a lesser expectation around what you would need to do to demonstrate compliance. There would still be an element of contract monitoring, but I suppose the basic point was, but you've got to start somewhere. So at least if we put it in the contracts, then when we're having conversations around contract monitoring, we're not just talking about performance, spend, the kind of typical things you might see and go. You're also talking about this really important area of practice, but it is on a continuum. So it forms part of the contracting monitoring process, Councillor.
Thank you. And in terms of the subgroup, looking at improvements to ensuring DBS checks for contractors, is that going to similarly affected by work pressures and the pandemic as well?
Again, it's different in different areas. I'm not sure whether, I think one of your further questions is about volunteers, for example. So if we took the volunteer element, so separate it out, if we talked about volunteers that are directly engaged by the council to support council run services, then effectively the expectation is, and the processes are in place, that the same process would be followed as if it was an employed member of staff, and then the monitoring arrangements, etc., just apply the same. Once you move into but what about all the volunteering that takes place in the third sector, for example? Well, it's referenced in the report, but there's a significant piece of work that's being undertaken at the moment that is looking about how can we implement it, but it won't end up being exactly the same because it'd be impossible to deliver in the same way. But how do you get to a point where you've got that high level of standard in place and a practical way by which third sector organisations can link with us and link with the training, etc. For the training bit, there is, particularly for that cohort, we have managed to find a kind of interim solution around training of volunteers that we've been very reliant on as part of the COVID response, where they have been able to access the council's learning pool, so they have been able to access exactly the same training. What's flagged in the report is, as we move to the post Oracle Fusion arrangements, there's still some work to be done about how do we make that work for external providers as well as council staff as well. So again, a bit of a work in progress, Councillor Black. But again, I'm really impressed with what we as a council, it's not really anything to do with me, but various people across the council have been able to take forward even in these really difficult circumstances.
Okay, thanks for that, Dave. Has anybody else got any questions at all?
Sorry, can I just add a little bit to that?
Mark, yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this stretches out beyond to what we as councillors spend our budget on as well. Because I know some people have used their budget for community events, say. And so as that is council money being used for community events, it's on us to make sure that we use that money, and the volunteers at that community event, particularly if they're working with children, have the proper checks. I mean, obviously we don't necessarily do it, but we need to be aware that those proper checks need to have been taken place before we use council money to pay for them.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Has anybody else got any questions at all on this report? I think Dave's covered my volunteer question in response to that last one as well. So, okay, well, can I thank you both for introducing this report and for bringing it to us. No doubt the issues which we've highlighted, particularly around volunteers and contractors, will be ongoing ones, and no doubt when this comes back in a year's time, we most really want to look to see what progress has been made on those particular issues, and no doubt we'll write to you as well to for any further information you might have on that. So thank you very much indeed for coming to the committee and presenting the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers. Okay, so we're now on to item 8, which is the Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report. I welcome again Paula O'Connor, the Chair of Audit. Paula, we've got the report. Would you want to introduce it and say a few words about the report?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. As you know, this report has been through the Governance and Audit Committee, and a number of members of this committee are also members of the Governance and Audit Committee. Councillor Black is one of those. So there would be that cross connection between both committees. This report also went to the council meeting in July 2021 for the full report, the annual report, for consideration, and also for the consideration of the terms of reference or statement of purpose. Obviously, we've been very heavily involved with Tracy and with Adam in getting advice to make sure that the work of both of those committees are as accordance to legislation, and both committees operate within the terms of reference that they've been set. I wouldn't want to say any more than that, but other than the fact that when the membership was being considered in light of the Local Government and Election Wales Act, where there was additional responsibilities coming in for the Governance and Audit Committee, I immediately met back in April time with the Chief Exec, and also had a conversation with Adam and with Ben regarding those new responsibilities and the importance to make sure that there was clarity between the work of the Audit Committee, Governance and Audit Committee as it was now named, and the Scrutiny Programme Committee. And coupled with that, I asked for a programme of training for the Governance and Audit Committees, so we had absolute clarity around those new responsibilities and where there was reliance going to be placed on other committees. Because I'm very firm, and I'm sure Councillor Black would confirm and support me in what I'm saying, is I'm very keen not to overstep any of the lines of the work of the Scrutiny Programme Committee. The remit of that committee is for scrutiny, and the Governance and Audit Committee is all around assurance and how we gain assurance that the processes and the objectives of the committee, of the council, are going to be met and achieved. I wouldn't want to regurgitate everything that's in the annual report, because I'm sure it's been well aired through that council meeting in July. But obviously the Governance and Audit Committee have flagged up the positives across the council, and much of that has been spoken about today, about the significant achievements that have been made across officers and staff of the committee in such a horrid, most pressurised time, and that's quite commendable, and the report absolutely reflects on that, but quite rightly it also reflects on the work that we need to do as we move forward with recovery and with transformation, etc. Workforce being one of the ones that we cited at the Workforce Committee, at the Governance and Audit Committee, which Councillor Black is taking forward through the scrutiny process in due course. So I wouldn't want to say any more than that. I don't know if you want to come in on that, Peter.
No, it's fine. I think Cyril Anderson's leading a scrutiny working group on workforce, and I think he's going to pick up some of the issues that came up in audit as a result of that. So the various panels and working groups do a lot of the work as well. So we just overlook that. I think Chris Holly had a question now. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's to be honest, I am very concerned about what this act means for elected members. And the reason being is that obviously with the Governance and Audit Committee, the terms of reference are far more than they were originally. And on top of that, the self-review and the reviewing process and the performance review. And I know that Peter and yourself are going to meet to discuss the future working arrangements, but I also feel that I'm going to meet with the leader to discuss really what is the purpose of performance. One of the things that we've noticed during the pandemic is that because of the changes in the various regulations coming from Welsh Government, the performance of any council, regardless of where it is, it can vary from time to time, and we do have a number of years that we look back on, but you can't actually use that as a reference, mainly because the change in benefits, the change in regulation, etc. So if we're then going to have another group, if you like, the Governance and Audit Committee, then also looking at performance, I then ask myself, well, why should the Finance and Performance and Scrutiny Finance Committee look at it as well? So I think there's one of those issues which is going to be taken up elsewhere. And the other thing is about the review process. And again, I'm not sure how elected members are going to react to that, because I accept the fact that there are elected members on the Audit Committee or the Governance and Audit Committee. But at the end of the day, we are the individuals that actually stand up for election to work how this council operates, and that's my concern, and that concern I am going to take up elsewhere. But I'm glad that Peter and you are going to meet to discuss this issue, and then he will report back to the rest of us. Thank you.
Yeah, Paula, do you want to respond? I mean, I think just to reassure Chris, I mean, your panel will still be looking at the performance reports and still be scrutinising that, but audit will be looking at it from a different perspective, as I'm sure Paula will explain.
Yeah, the work of the Governance and Audit Committee is all around what assurance we gain in from committees like the ones you refer to, and scrutiny is part of that. And we take assurance from that group. We don't want to replicate any of the work that you're doing, and we don't want to impede any of the scrutiny you're applying. You know, we take assurance from the work that you do, and the work that you do is impressive across all those scrutiny groups, your working groups, and also the comprehensive scrutiny annual report that Peter brought to the last Governance and Audit Committee. We were able to take significant assurance from in a large number of areas. So I think it's going along a journey to make sure that we fully understand, and I'm absolutely sure and confident that Adam and Tracy will have us absolutely on the right track to make sure that we're not falling foul of crossing any line that would put us out of a compliance issue with the Act. That's something I'm not in the game for.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the self-review, self-assessment one is the one that, again, which is one I think is going to be an issue as well, but I will take that up.
I absolutely can see where you're coming from, Councillor Holly, and all I can do is assure you I'd be looking for assurance coming through the committee, not to question what was discussed, what challenges were given, and what conclusions you've come to. It's if there's anything that the Governance and Audit Committee has spotted, looking down from a very bird's eye view, that would add to any of those views, not to question or challenge. So I hope that reassures you in some way. But I want to work with Peter, and we want to get this working right to be the most effective that we both can be.
Yeah, and Paul and I are both in a meeting later this week looking at Wales Audit's office reports, because I'm keen that some of those, where they're relevant, come to various scrutiny panels as well as the audit committee, to make sure that we're looking at them properly and following any recommendations which has an impact on the council as well.
Yeah, because some of these issues that are coming in, not from the local government, but from Audit Wales, are going to potentially, make the waters even more muddy than they initially appear with this Act. And I want to batten that down because, I want it crystal clear and nothing else.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Has anyone else got any questions for Paul or any comments at all on this report? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Paula, for attending and for presenting the report. It's been very helpful and useful. Thank you.
Do you want me to stay, or can I say?
If you're welcome to stay if you want to. It's most probably in about 10 minutes or so left of the meeting, but you're welcome to stay if you want to.
It's only 10 minutes then.
We're just going to look at the Child and Family Services now, because the next item is the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report, and Paxton is introducing that to us. Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to say an awful lot of this, to be honest. I think you have in front of you what is a very comprehensive report in terms of what has been happening with us since the last time we brought a progress report to the to this committee. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read it. What I will say, if anybody's got any questions, then I will attempt then to try and answer them to your satisfaction.
Are you having the same pressures as adult services in terms of obviously Sue's had to significantly rein back her programme because of the pressures on officers? Is that affecting your panel as well, Paxton?
We haven't been asked to do that, Chairman.
No. Yeah.
On this occasion. It does seem to be a problem specifically with adult social services, as I understand it. Obviously, if the department finds that it does need to be talking to us in that respect, we will obviously listen very sympathetically, I think, as we have been doing all the way through on this.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody got any questions for Paxton or any comments on the report? No, I shall take silence as meaning no, you haven't then. Okay, thanks very much,
Let me just
Paxton.
say something else.
Of course you can.
Before I finish, Chairman. This report that is in front of you, obviously, the lead officer is Liz Jordan, one of the scrutiny staff. And I suspect that it's the same applies to me as applies to everybody else in terms of these conveners of scrutiny performance panels, just how reliant we are on the staff in scrutiny and the work that they do. And I think it really needs to be put on public record that certainly from my point of view, I'm very grateful for the work that's done, particularly from my point of view, but the whole of the scrutiny team, I think, in that sense, Peter, I think you'd probably agree with me, they need to have that appreciation stated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with Liz and with the other scrutiny staff, and they're absolutely excellent, all of them. So absolutely back that up 100%. And Sue is nodding too.
Well. Yeah, I would agree as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Paxton. Adam, you want to come in?
I think, yeah, just to thank you. Just to thank you on behalf of the team. I'll make sure that goes back to them as a formal thanks from everybody in terms of the hard work and commitment they do put in, and they do go over and above. So I'll make sure that gets back to them. Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. Okay, right. Item 10 is membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. The only change we've got to report is that Wendy Fitzgerald is coming off the procurement inquiry panel.
I don't know if anybody got anything else to say on that particular one. If not, I shall move on to the Scrutiny work programme. And as you can see, just to note that, as has already been reported, that Sue's Adult Services Performance Panel programme has been adjusted because of the COVID-related pressures. And in terms of the Healthy City Working Group, again, because of pressures on social services and the health service who are leading on this particular thing, that hasn't been able to be taken forward. There has been a discussion with the chair, Jen Rayner, about that, and it's been agreed that we're going to leave that until the next, well, it's actually the next financial year, the next after the elections, it will be effectively. So we're going to bring forward the Road Safety Working Group instead, which is the reserve topic, which is due to meet in February next year, and Councillor Steve Gallagher has been is convening that, and there are 14 councillors on it. So that's just for information. Of committee are happy with that. Obviously, we would have liked to have carried forward the Healthy Cities working group, but unfortunately, because of the impact of the pandemic and particularly the pressures on social services and the health service, we weren't able to do so. So hopefully the road safety working group will be a good substitute, and we'll be able to go back to Healthy Cities next year at some stage. So that again is for your information. Anybody on that? No. Okay, I'm going to move on then. So onto the scrutiny letters. As you recall, the letters here are relating to the Bus Services Working Group, which was chaired by Councillor Lyndon Jones. A letter to and from the Cabinet member on that of there. Lyndon, do you want to say something on some words about your working group and the work you did there?
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you can see, the Bus Services Scrutiny Working Group met in July. So very grateful to Councillor Mark Thomas, the Cabinet member, Stuart Davis and Kath Swain from Swansea Council, and of course First Cymru, and we invited Cardiff Bus along, who were a social enterprise, so we could look at comparisons. The recommendations by the working group and the reply from the Cabinet member are self-explanatory. One thing is certain, though, that bus services affect every single community across Swansea. And one or two things I'd like to highlight that people were concerned about, and members felt that there should be regular meetings with the bus companies and councillors, because that is important. Councillors know what's happening in their wards, so that is important. And the other point is, we felt that if we are to increase the use of public transport, we need to in some way do a survey, and whether that went through when we are putting out our council tax bills or whatever, to those people who don't use buses and asking them why they don't, and then look at ways to encourage them to use buses. So that is a sort of a proactive way of doing that. I know that because I've been in touch with some of the councillors since the working group, and there have been meetings with First Cymru, but I have to say in some cases they simply haven't listened to the points that were made by the councillors, which is, I think, disappointing. Following at the end of the group and the recommendations, you can see that it was thought that we should meet possibly in 6 months, because they felt that the last working group that met in 2013 hadn't followed through those recommendations. In Councillor Mark Thomas's reply, he said that they had worked through, he'd looked at them, and indeed they have. So what I have done is arranged for Liz to send out the 2013 report to all councillors who were on the working group, so they can actually see that. The thought was that we would meet again in 6 months, but totally appreciate the fact of the pressure on the scrutiny team. And speaking to Bridge, he suggested that maybe it would be something that this committee would look at down the line to make sure that all the actions and the recommendations were sort of followed through. And that is the only thing I would. There's one final thing, and it's a point that we really reiterated at the meeting. We said at the meeting is the fact that big thanks to the bus drivers and also the staff behind them in their teams for the work that they've been doing, because the bottom line is they kept going throughout the pandemic, and to get those people who had to go into work, give them that ability to get into work.
Okay, I think, Lyndon, given the detail in this report and the detailed response from the cabinet member, it most probably would be better if the working group convened briefly just to go through that. Okay. You know, maybe, I mean, 6 months takes you to what, April? March, April, maybe sometime in March, might just briefly we have a meeting just to go through and maybe talk to the cabinet member about what the response. I noticed that you didn't actually say a survey in your letter, but you did say they need to listen to people who use buses and don't use them. So, and that hasn't really been responded to in the cabinet's letter as such. So maybe you may want to follow that up in a meeting. So maybe if the working group could briefly convene, maybe beginning of March next year, and then come back to us with the report, and we, or may well be you'll have to come after the election with a report or whatever you meet, but certainly I think it's worth just following that through, because I'm keen these things aren't lost.
Yes, thank you. I think in his reply, Councillor Thomas said he was very happy to meet up again. So yeah, great. I will take that forward then. Thank you.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any comments at all on this at all? No? Okay, can I thank Lyndon and the members of the working group for the work they've done on this. It's been very valuable and hopefully will help to improve the bus services in the area as well. Okay, so the last item is the date and timing of upcoming scrutiny panel meetings, which are in front of you. And can I therefore thank everybody for attending again today, and hopefully we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'll close the meeting.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.